Now, Mr. President, it's Thursday, and it's one of my favorite times of the week because it's my time that I take to come down on the floor. I think it's the new pages are on the floor. I think you're going to start to see this is probably one of your favorite times as well, because it's when I talk about what we call the Alaskan of the week. And it's the opportunity to highlight somebody in my state who's done something great for their community, the state, the country, and brag a little bit about Alaska. So, Mr. President, today I'm going to talk about Jacob Adams from Utqiagvik, formerly known as Barrow, Alaska, and he has been a hero to so many in our state, including me, a giant of an individual who has spent his whole life in public service for his culture, for his community, for his state, for his country. And before I get started about Jake Adams, let me talk a little bit about what's going on in Alaska right now. Now, I know that we all think we live in the best states. Each of us likes to come down and brag, and that's a good thing. But in Alaska, we certainly have a lot of bragging rights on a whole host of issues, a whole host of areas where we are very unique. Right now in Alaska, it's a beautiful time to be in the state. We want the tourists, anyone watching on TV, come on up to our great state. The flowers are blooming, the salmon are running up our rivers, hundreds of thousands, soon literally millions of salmon will be running. According to our Department of Fish and Game, it's going to be a great season for our reds. And of course, the sun is our familiar friend this time of year. In the northern part of my state, in Utqiagvik, as I mentioned, the northernmost city in the entire United States, it's not setting at all. The sun is not setting at all. Midnight sun, pure energy. It's amazing to experience it. We experience it, but we want everybody else to come on up and experience it. Something else is going on in Alaska, in the villages in the northern part of the state, Mr. President, around this time of year, a very unique and special cultural tradition. The spring whaling season in 11 communities on the North Slope is wrapping up. This spring, those 11 North Slope communities were able to land 24 whales, equaling somewhere between 300 and 400 tons of highly nutritious food for these wonderful communities. That whale meat is then shared in villages throughout the whaling communities, and it is just an incredible tradition, Alaska Native tradition that we are all in awe of. So we're heading into Nalakatuk season, and this is when the communities get together to celebrate this incredible bounty and harvest. It's a special day, a time of celebration, time of sharing. On this day, successful whaling crews share and feed the communities from morning until night. Whale, caribou soup, goose and duck soup, fish, served to everyone, anyone who comes. Really, really special. The community also celebrates with a blanket toss where people are tossed high into the air. The seal skins that sewed together the boat from the successful whale hunts are used for the blanket. Another beautiful Alaska Native tradition that we cherish, natives and non-natives in our state. There's a long list of people to thank for keeping this incredible whaling culture, Nupiat culture, and heritage alive in Alaska. But Mr. President, Jake Adams is certainly on the top of that list. He is a proud whaling captain himself and a founding member of the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission, which has been the primary force in making sure that our whaling communities continue to get the quotas that they need internationally from the International Whaling Commission, that they need to continue to practice and to feed their people, to keep this amazing cultural heritage practice going. And it's not been easy, but they have fought for self-determination, and they have won repeatedly, including in a big IWC meeting in Brazil last year. And it's because of Jake Adams' leadership, incredible leadership, that this tradition is so far advanced and revered in Alaska, and I would say around the world. Jake has done that and so much more for his community and people all across the great state of Alaska. In one word, Mr. President, he is a legend. A true legend for Alaska, and I'm proud to have him as a friend. Jake's accomplishments are too long to list here, but let me spend a few minutes highlighting just a few of those accomplishments. Let me start with his background. He was born to Baxter and Rebecca Adams in Utqiagvik in 1946. He was raised in the tradition of the Nupiat people, respecting their elders, revering the land and the resources for its spiritual, physical, and emotional sustenance. And like so many Alaska natives, as a boy, he was actually sent away to school in Alaska, far away, to a school called Mount Edgecombe, hundreds, actually over thousands of miles away, a boarding school that was run by BIA, and then he went to the University of Alaska Fairbanks until he got his first job with BIA. Now, all of this, Mr. President, was a time of great change for the whole state of Alaska, particularly for the Alaska Native people. While Jake was still a young man, the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, what we call ANCSA, was being debated in the halls of Congress, right here on the floors of the United States Senate. This ended up being one of the largest land settlements anywhere in the world, literally in the history of the world, right here in the U.S. Senate. And the story around the passage of ANCSA after decades of struggle in 1971 is certainly one for the ages. Jake Adams, among so many others, was highly involved in the passage of this landmark legislation for Alaska, and he was even more involved in the implementation of ANCSA, which set up shareholder-owned businesses with land for the Alaska Native people, what we call regional and village corporations throughout the state. Stories abound of him and other Native leaders knocking on doors throughout the region, making sure that people were signed up as shareholders of these new corporations. And when he was only 21, Jake was elected to the Barrow City Council and began his long decades of public service for Alaska, for his people. He then served as mayor of the city from 1971 through 1977, and then the North Slope Borough was incorporated. That's the borough on the north part of Alaska, by the way, bigger than California. That was established, and he was a leader for the North Slope Borough in our state. Mr. President, their corporation, the Alaska Native Corporation on the North Slope, Arctic Slope Regional Corporation, or as we call it in Alaska, ASRC, is one of the great business success stories in our state. I would say in America. Many people credit the work that Jake did at ASRC for making it so successful. Now, he worked closely with so many other great leaders at ASRC and on the North Slope. Oliver Levitt, certainly one, another great leader. In fact, Mr. President, the North Slope Borough, ASRC, these organizations have produced really wonderful leaders for Alaska. Crawford Pukatuck, Rex Rock, Tara Sweeney, Richard Glenn. But Mr. President, I'm digressing here a little bit. Let's get back to Jake. He was on the board of ASRC from the very beginning and is still on the board today, over 40 years, and he was involved in the selection of nearly 5 million acres of land for that corporation under the law passed by the Senate and the House, with limited time and limited funds to do this. But he's a wise man, and ASRC selected well. ASRC land is rich in natural resources and abundant in wildlife. Jake has always been a strong proponent of making sure those resources and that wildlife form the basis of economic development and a sustainable way of life. Our lands are the basis for all of our culture and our wealth, he likes to say. Eventually, Jake became the president and CEO of ASRC, and under his leadership, as I mentioned, ASRC has grown and diversified in terms of one of the top corporations, certainly in Alaska, I would say in the country, with thousands of employees, not just in Alaska, but all over. He was able to do all this while still subsistence hunting and raising a family of 6 with his wonderful wife, Lucille. He often conducted business on his boat in the North Slope and overseas, on his boat while whaling. Not many business leaders in America can say that. Quote, "The land and sense of place remain extremely important to our people," Jake once told a reporter. "We truly do exist in 2 worlds. Our culture and the values of traditions are part of our everyday life, even as we pursue more Western business type of activities." So, Mr. President, he has done so much more for Alaska, for his people, for our people, supporting the Native sobriety movement, working to eradicate illegal drugs from Native villages. He's been involved with the Volunteer Search and Rescue Organization and is a huge advocate for education. In honor of Jake's commitment to education, the ASRC Alaska Educational Foundation created a scholarship award in his name. The Onagi Leadership Award is given each year to a student, providing up to $24,000 for tuitions and fees and college expenses. At his retirement ceremony from the executive leadership of ASRC in 2006, the people of the North Slope Borough literally cried. Literally cried. He is that well respected. And for his many accomplishments, last year he was awarded an honorary doctorate of law degree from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Mr. President, Jake Adams is a man of wisdom. I have a story. When I was Attorney General 10 years ago, I was dealing with a particularly difficult situation. When I worked out what I thought was a good resolution, I flew to Utiavik to meet with Jake, to ask him if he agreed, and importantly, if the community agreed. I explained the situation, and importantly, when I asked him what he thought, he said he thought it would be a just resolution and he would be supportive of it. That meant so much to me as Alaska's Attorney General, getting his advice and his wisdom. Mr. President, Jake Adams is a man of few words, but when he speaks, it is powerful and people listen. He is a man of deep, deep wisdom. Ask anyone who knows him, and they'll talk about his wisdom, his natural leadership, his humility, and his abiding love of the land, the people, Alaska, and his family, which now includes 13 grandchildren. A few years ago, at a celebration in his honor, John Hobson Jr., another great Alaskan Native leader from the North Slope, talked about how much Jake has contributed to his community in Alaska. Quote, "Jake has also bridged the world between traditional whaling captain and corporate American leader. A highly successful whaling captain, he also provided guidance to our North Slope Borough and the Arctic Slope Regional Corporation as they matured as institutions. He has filled these roles, these leadership roles, with deep resolve, wisdom, and great foresight, and has always acted with the highest honor towards his family and his community." Well said, John Hobson Jr., about Jake Adams. So Jake, thank you for all you've done for us, for your community, for all Alaskans. Thank you for your decades of service to Alaska, your leadership. Thank you, Lucille, for sharing him with us. And congratulations again on being our Alaskan of the Week. I yield the floor.